You good? You got your book? You ready? Okay. All right. We are here with Dr. Jon Paul Higgins to celebrate the release of their new book, Black Fat Femmes. And we're also happy and excited to have you here. Thank you so much. And you'll be signing books afterwards,
yes.
right?
Yeah,
after this conversation.
Yes.
In conversation with Andre Wade, who to me, I feel like is a legend in Las Vegas media space.
Yes.
So we're
very
so happy
much
to
a
have you
legend.
here in conversation. And you know where you are, the Analog Dope Store. So if you don't have a book yet, you can also purchase one inside the store, along with taking a look and browsing around, seeing what's going on inside the shop. So we thank you all for being here. So go ahead and join the conversation.
Thank you. Applause. Yeah, like you should have applaud. Thank you. And I'm sorry about the sun. She a little hotter than what I anticipated. Yeah.
It's vitamin D.
Yes. Melanin.
So, Doctor.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Hello there.
Hi again.
Salutations.
Yeah.
Yes, we ran into each other at the event for the Brother of the Desert a couple of months ago.
We did.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we first met?
I do not.
See,
I
I'm
don't.
gonna talk about you now.
Okay. Blame COVID.
It was during
ran.
COVID.
Was it?
It was during COVID.
Was it online?
Yes.
Yes, we did. Okay, I know. Now it's coming back to me.
Oh, now.
Yes.
Okay, Celine.
Yes, it's all coming back to me now. Yes. No.
Yeah, so just a little bit of context, at least for me. We met during COVID when a lot of organizations were online and were having conversations about racism, homophobia, transphobia, and doing various webinars and whatnot. And for Equality California, whom I work for, Dr. Jon Paul was one of the panelists. And then I started following you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And low-key watching your journey. And so for the audience, can you speak a little bit about who you are and how you got here?
Yeah, so I always tell people I'm an educator by trade. I started off with the idea that I was going to basically change. I had grown up not seeing any Black people or Black men specifically in my educational journey. And so I said I wanted to be that for other students. And then I just started, very much kind of being very hyper aware, I should say, of media because I have a degree in comms, because I was teaching in comms, because I was doing a lot of work specifically around inclusion at my institution. And I just everything started kind of becoming more prevalent to me. And so that is where, kind of the idea for this book started to kind of ruminate, was around this notion of like, wow, there are no real true Black figures or queer Black figures that I could look at that can truly make me feel good about myself. And this is specifically in a very early time. And I talk about this in one of the chapters. And so as I started having these thoughts and started thinking more about why is it that we only have like one or two good Black or brown people that I can look to for, to be encouraged, I started thinking about this idea of like, how do we change media? How do we talk more openly and honestly about what inclusion looks like without it being so whitewashed? And that's kind of where my career kind of started to take off. I kind of started getting tapped by places like Ebony and Essence and all these other places to write kind of what now I call them stink pieces, but a lot of think pieces around this idea of what inclusion looks like. And it kind of just led me to this now brand of everyone knowing me as the person who is, interrogating media in the way it should be interrogated. So.
And through your interrogation, you have a couple of outlets, one being a podcast, which is called
Black Fat Femmes, yes.
And you now have a book called
Black Fat Femmes.
All right. And so with your book, there's basically like three components of it.
Yes. Yeah.
There is the memoir component.
Yes.
There is the media criticism component.
Correct.
And there is, for lack of a better term, self-help component. What got you to structure the book in that way?
Yeah, well, one, the publisher, right? So the publisher, when they came to me, before they even went to the bidding war, they were very big on this idea of saying, we want to make sure that we have something that speaks to the experiences of Black queer people. And like I was saying, for me, every time I thought about what this book was and what this book could be, I kept thinking, there is no book like this. All Boys Aren't Blue, no shade, right? It's a great book, but it's not specifically talking about the interrogation of identity, right? It's talking about this, this idea or this experience about what it means to kind of come into yourself. And so I kept thinking about that. There's really nothing that really speaks to me. A lot of the stuff that I see is kind of like hodgepodgey, where I'm having to take words from someone else's book and someone else's book or someone else's idea, and then I'm having to kind of like bring that together. And so as I was, doing the podcast for the last 3 years, I kept thinking about what this book could be. And the one thing that I really wanted it to be was something that, my 14, 15-year-old self could grab and say, I'm trying to make sense of my identity, and I understand partly what that identity is, but here's a book now that can help me kind of go through or, kind of examine some of the stuff that I've been thinking about or that I've been feeling, and actually be able to make some sense of it.
I think you make a lot of sense of it for a lot of people who don't necessarily have to be all three of the intersections that the book is about. Yeah. When I was reading it, I was like, it's just amazing how much our experiences have been similar. Mm-hmm. We all have the bullying that we went through, issues with food, but in the reverse. Right. Like your relationship with food caused you to, let's say, overeat. Mm-hmm. Mine was undereating. Okay. And even when it was things about the relationship to media, watching music videos all day and all those things. And so did you realize that you were creating a book that was going to be accessible to so many more people than maybe you thought your intended audience was going to be?
That's actually been the surprise. When people ask me about, the book itself, I've had more people read the book and reach out to me and say, I grabbed the book on the precipice of just knowing you as Dr. Jon Paul and being like a fan. I didn't know your story, and then I read the book and I didn't realize how much it was my story. And and these are like white women from like LinkedIn that are messaging me, telling me that this story speaks to them. And so I guess it's kind of one of those things, I always say that the universe is going to use you. And I think that's what this became, because I've also told people on my journey, this book it wasn't like I woke up one day, I was like, I'm going to write a book. It literally started almost 9 years ago that I started thinking about this idea of this book. And it took a few years for me to really get to a place where I knew what I was actually going to write about. And so it was almost as if I was, the seed was planted in 2017, and I was just sitting with it. And then finally one day it just was like, oh, I got it. And I think that was a big part of it, was me wanting to make sure that every single bit of this book, from me talking about my personal experience to me talking about what my educational experience was like, to how media, I talk a lot about the 2000s and how toxic the 2000s were, and how we're starting to see that kick back up now, especially with this whole Ozempic trend, right? We're seeing people dance around fat phobia, but a lot of it is still very much rooted in a very terrible conversation. And so all that to be said, no, I did not anticipate people being able to connect with this book this way, but I'm also very happy that people are.
You should be. And in your story, the memoir section of it, you talk about your family quite a bit.
I do.
And you mention your uncles quite a bit.
Yeah.
And as I was reading, I was like, I need an update. I need to know, what is your relationship like now with your uncles?
Who? I'm just kidding.
There you go. Next question.
No. So I think it's funny because I've had several of my family members reach out. Specifically 2 or 3 of my cousins have reached out and said, hey, I've read through the book, or I've gotten to the chapters with the stuff, and they knew exactly who I was talking about. My uncles per se, I don't think that they care, and I think that's the thing. I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for me, as like kind of as a way to close that chapter and to be able to kind of let people know that while these experiences are terrible and they shouldn't be normalized, like this is what a lot of us have to deal with. And so, but my cousins, specifically one of my cousins, he's been very intentional about saying, I now have a child, and and same thing with my brother. My brother actually finished the book a couple weeks ago. And he hit me and he said, I know who those people are in the book. I know what uncle you're talking about, and I'm so grateful you put it down, because it's a reminder to me of what I don't want to be to my son. And I think that for me is what made me feel like, okay, I did what I was supposed to do, even though I was really worried about, and that was the bigger part, was those stories almost didn't make it into the book until I met with my therapist and I told her where I was in the process of the book, and her, verbiage to me was, well, if they're gonna be worried about what you're gonna write about, they should have treated you better. And that kind of hit me of like, oh, okay, well, I went back and started, telling my story the way I wanted to tell it. And so I think of it that way, but I'm grateful that, like I said, my cousins and my brothers, my brother, he read it, and I think it hit for them differently because they know me so much more personally. And it's gonna help them raise their kids in the way that they wanna raise them, so.
And a lot of the issues, the conflict was related to their expectations of what a Black boy, young Black man should be in their presentation, their performance of manhood, masculinity. Can you speak a little bit more about how these expectations played out for you and how you decided to make this part of this book? Yeah.
Well, I think this book in itself is a larger critique on there's so many things. I think masculinity is one, but I also think toxic masculinity is another. I think it's a huge critique on the idea of how media plays into that, specifically thinking about this idea of what a man can and can't do and what a man should be. And it's a greater critique on this conversation of what does it even mean to be a man? And I've asked this question several times. I've even written articles about it. Like, what does it mean to be a man in this world, right? And when I don't know, there's a documentary out there that focuses on that. I forget the name. It's escaping me. But that was kind of the same caveat of what I've been doing in my work and critiquing this notion of what is femininity, what is masculinity, and really thinking of it from this idea of like what how honestly the way I can say it in my head, how harmful the binary is to people, how much we all struggle with performance and showing up the ways that quote unquote the world wants us to show up, and how so much of that is rooted in white supremacy and whiteness, and how scary that can be. And so I think that's really what the critique is. It's, yes, my uncles did terrible things to me, and yes, my family said really sad and horrible things to me as I was growing up, but also this notion of how fearful I was to just exist for a very long time. And it took me going to therapy and doing the work I needed to do to get to a place to where I was like, I'm just gonna be myself, because what's the point? Like, what's the point of trying to pretend to be someone else in a world that's already judging me anyway for just being Black? I'm just being Black, I already get judged. So I might as well just be, my full femme self and also hungry self at the same time, and call it a day. And that's literally what this is trying to tell people. I'm trying to tell people that no matter how much time you spend trying to be everything that someone wants you to be, you're still going to end up being very empty in the end. And so why not love you and celebrate you in the way you want to celebrate you, so that way you don't have to feel that way for the majority of your life.
Yes. Very powerful in that it comes from within. Before we look inside ourselves, sometimes we look outward.
Amen.
That outward perspective for you was media.
Yeah.
And looking for answers, questions, representation through media. What did you not see back in the early 2000s? And what do you see now? And how do you fit into being a part of the solution? Yeah.
So I'll say this: I didn't see people, and again, it always makes me real sad because when I see celebrities lose weight, I'm like, damn, we lost another one. Even just right now, right? Everyone's lauding Lizzo for her weight loss, right? And it's always kind of like, and it's also like you start to understand. I always tell people I live on both sides of that conversation, right? I understand why celebrities lose weight. I understand why people lose weight, especially in the entertainment industry. It is hard as hell to be like I tell people, being Black, fat, and femme, there are three things in the world that the world hates, right? And so having to be all of those things and having to stand up in those things and be strong in those things, it's exhausting, right? People think I just wake up every day and I'm like, hey girl, how you doing? But every day I'm literally like, I am so tired. Like I'm tired, and so I say all of that to say, like, I think I understand why people do it, but I definitely think there is this notion of a lot of covert. I wouldn't even say, I mean, it's becoming more overt. There's a lot of overt racism we're seeing again. That's kind of creeping up into media. We're seeing a lot more fat phobia, and again, people are using it in a covert way. Well, I'm doing it for health, or I'm doing it for this, and I'm like, no, you're not. You're doing it because it's easier. We all know how hard it is to be fat in this world. And the same thing around masculinity and you know, and homophobia and all of the different things in between that. You know, I just wish that somebody, I wish in the 2000s I would have had somebody look at me and say, girl, it's gonna be okay to just, you're fine. And that's why I'm grateful for the Little Nas X's. I'm thankful for the Saucy Santanas. I'm thankful for all of the people who, you know, give me the onus to be my authentic self. But at the same time, I'm also telling people, be careful about how much media you're taking in, because as much as it may seem like it's celebrating you, a lot of it is very, very insidious.
Yes, it is. My media outlet was in the 90s.
Yeah.
I definitely see where you were at in the 2000s with the different images and lack thereof representation. Yeah. In your book, you, again, tell your story, you do your media critique, and you also give some guidance and some helpful tips for folks who are reading the book, who need a little extra leaven.
Yeah.
Can you just briefly kind of go through some of your suggestions for people to live like a authentic life in this world that's challenging?
I think the one thing that has been really helpful for me, even in this time, because I know, you know, I get this question a lot, like, how are you dealing with what's everything that's going on in the world? And I've been telling people it has been really easy for me to focus on what I feel like I've been put on this earth to do, and which is to encourage people and to move the pendulum in terms of how we talk about who we are and how we show up in this world. So that's the first thing, is being honest and authentic with myself about how I'm feeling, how I see the world, how I'm moving about the world. But really recognizing that a lot of what we feel about ourselves has nothing to do with us. A lot of it is very much the insecurities that other people put onto you. You know, I've been told time and time again, John, you are very, you intimidate a lot of people. And I go, kind of that Oprah, am I intimidating or were they intimidated? Like, it's very much this game of, is it me or is it them? And I'm learning very quickly that a lot of it is them. And so that's kind of the first part. But I would also say the other part too is recognizing that a lot of the terrible things that we say in our head are not our voices. And that is something that I've held on to for a very long time, and learning that really mean thing I'm saying to myself about my body, that really mean thing I'm saying to myself about my skin, the really mean thing that I'm saying to myself about the way I perform in this world, that's not my voice, right? I like me a lot. And so really trying to put that voice to rest. And I'll tell you right now, you know, I'm one of those people that I will just be sitting and minding my business and a random thought will come by. You suck. And it's like, wait, I ain't even do nothing to nobody. Wait, what? So trying to take that thought and put it away, of like, I'm gonna say mean things to myself and I'll let that thought come and then let it float away, you know? And so I think that's been the biggest thing of what this book is, right? Just recognizing that you have the right to like you, you have the right to love you, you have the right to really, I think for me, the biggest thing is I've learned to protect myself. I've learned boundaries. I've learned how to talk to myself. I've learned how to tell people to talk to me. And I've learned how to also advocate for myself. And I think that's really what this is. Outside of everything else in this, if you don't take anything else from this book, I'm hoping that people will read it and really, you know, sit with it and say, I need to figure out how I can better advocate for me with family, friends, cousins, you know, co-workers, you know, everybody. I need them to be able to know who I am and also understand how to respect me, so that way you don't walk away being defeated or being deflated every time you have interactions with people.
One of the many media figures that you point to in the book is Luther Vandross.
Yes.
And where's the dog? Luther
Vandross.
Yeah,
yes.
Luther Vandross?
I don't know where Luther Vandross is.
The universe is just talking today. I have a dog be called Luther Vandross.
Yeah.
For me, Luther the music was always on our family trips.
Yes.
Always on Sunday afternoons after church. church music in the morning. Then after that, you get to some Luther. What was your relationship to Luther and why?
Yeah. So I always, the thing I have to make very clear about why I included Luther in the book, and I had to do it in a very interesting way because I didn't want to get sued by his estate. I actually reached out to his estate for them to read the chapter, and they gave me the thumbs up before we moved on with the book. But I initially, in the book, I intentionally say this chapter is not about Luther Vandross's sexuality. I want to make that very clear because I think people think when I mentioned Luther that I was going to talk about whether him being out or not. The chapter around Luther is very much this notion of how people talked around Luther and nobody ever really talked to Luther. And it was also about this game of Luther not talking to other people about who he was because he didn't trust nobody. And I think that's the thing that I really wanted people to garner from that chapter was, as a young child, I watched how people talked about me to my mom. I watched how my cousins and my uncles talked to my mother about me. And nobody ever came to me and said, hey, John, this thing or how you're acting or whatever the case may be, what is that or what's going on? Or just let Jonathan be, right? Like it was always my mom having to protect me. And so I just saw Luther as a very guarded person and even at times angry. I watched a lot, so I saw his document, and that's partly what actually helped me figure out what the book was going to be about, was seeing the documentary and talking to Don Porter about that doc. But I initially really saw, as digging and watching a lot of his old archival videos, I would notice his interactions and I would notice his body language, and it was very much giving guarded. He did not trust anybody with anything. And then hearing stories about how he had food addiction and how food became his, it felt, a lot of his story felt like mine. And that's why I opened the book talking about Luther, because I think that's one of the things that we don't do enough of. We talk about people, but we never talk to people. And that for me was really important to note.
Who else? There's several other people that you mentioned in the book. Who would you like to pull out of the book to let the audience know why they were important to you?
Miss J. I always go to Miss J. I don't know if you all know who Miss J is, but Miss J is from Next Top Model. She had a bob, and she would literally she was just as terrible as Tyra. I want to make sure I make that very clear that was a very interesting time in history. If you have not watched America's Next Top Model, watch a season. They used to chop those girls' hair off and send them home, and they'd be so damn sad. It was distressed. The whole show was distressed and just terrible. But anyway, I said all that to say what I loved about Miss J was that Miss J knew who she was when she was in the room. And you knew who she was. And that's the thing I garnered from her, watching her. She didn't let people talk to her any kind of way. It was very much, you come in here, I'm gonna tell you how to walk, you gonna walk, and then we gonna be done. And that's it, right? And if you didn't do what Miss J said, Miss J has something. And it was just very much this energy of she controlled the energy in the space. And that was something that I as even just with therapy, I'm learning how to do, right? How, it's funny because even when I was coming here, I was walking through Resort World and I could see people staring. And there were moments when I was younger, I would be like, oh my God, they're staring at me. They're trying to figure out my gender. They're trying to, what are they thinking of me? And today I was like, hi, I see you looking at me. Hello, how you doing? My nail color, yes, it's cute. Thank you. Like, I've gotten to this place, but it's Miss J who helped me get there, right? It's the Miss J of it all. And then even my budding friendship with Miss Lawrence, having Miss Lawrence, Real Housewives of Atlanta, I'm grateful that these people, and that's the other part about why I also put them in the book too. They're still here and they are still making history and people are not talking enough about it. And so I'm grateful that I get to know these people, on whether it be a parasocial level or whether it be a personal level. I can call Miss Lawrence now, but it's nice to know I can give them their flowers and say, thank you for being who you are. I'm having this issue in the industry. How do I navigate it? I call Miss Lawrence and she's telling me how to walk through it, right? And so I think that's the big part for me that I love. I really appreciate that these people are, again, they're taking up space in the right way and they're telling people how to treat them.
Well, I have many more questions to ask, but I'm gonna throw one more out at you and then open it up to the audience and see how it goes from there. But there's I could talk to you forever about your
Yes.
book. I'm really curious about the folks you've talked to since the book has come out.
Yeah.
That hopefully you've had a chance to interact with who've read the book. And I'm curious about the feedback you've gotten from folks who you were writing the book for.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about the reaction so far?
Like I said, I think the biggest thing for me is I've never been that girl to be like, yes, I'm that girl, and I wrote this book because I'm that girl, right? I think it's insane to me. I think one of the things that has blown me away is how people are reading the book and they're hitting me and they're saying this changed my life in this way, or they're saying this helped me with this. You know, I even have a friend who is an adoptee, and she has been dealing with a lot of issues with her Asian identity and also with her adopted identity and her queer identity. And she just finished the book, and she hit me and she's telling me all the things that she's learned through the book based off of it. And so just again, going back to one of your earlier questions, it blows my mind that there's people who are reading this book and are taking my story and are fusing it with their own and doing the healing that they need to do in the way that they need to. And that's really what this book was. Like I tell people all the time, this book was, yes, it may have my big face on the cover, but it's not about me. It's none of this work is about me. It's about me being able to give people keys and tidbits that they can use to save themselves, or for youth to be able to know that one day their life will get better. And knowing that there are people who are still here like me who are helping them or wanting to help them get better or make their lives better. And so I think to your point, that's the thing I'm starting to learn. It's really cool to have people reach out to me and say, your book is helping me make sense of a lot of the things that I've struggled with for a very long time. And I'm grateful that the work I've done, because I'm gonna tell you, like I said, it took 9 years to get this finished. Around that, it took around almost about that time for me to get it finished. I'm really grateful that what the healing that I did to get to a place where I could write this is now helping other people heal in the ways that they need to heal.
Well, I think you did a fantastic job with it.
I appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Are there any questions from